November 18, 1978, Jonestown, Guyana. Deep within the remote jungles of Guyana, a community known as Jonestown was supposed to be a socialist paradise. Founded by Jim Jones, the charismatic leader of the People's Temple, it promised a haven from the racism and injustice of America, a place where everyone was equal and lived in harmony. Thousands of followers, predominantly poor and minority Americans, had left everything behind to build this utopia. For years, Jones had cultivated an image of a benevolent, prophetic leader, capable of miracles and deeply committed to social justice. His followers adored him, believing he offered salvation and a true alternative to a corrupt world. But the promise of paradise was a cruel illusion. Jonestown was, in reality, a totalitarian nightmare, isolated from the outside world, where Jones wielded out power. On this fateful day, the illusion shattered. Following the murder of Congressman Leo Ryan and for others, Jones ordered his followers to commit revolutionary suicide. Over 900 people, including more than 300 children, died by cyanide poisoning. This wasn't just a mass suicide. This was a profound psychological collapse, orchestrated by one man and tragically embraced by hundreds. The psychology of charismatic leadership and absolute control. The psychology of obedience to authority that silenced individual will. The psychology of groupthink that solidified a deadly consensus. This is the story of how a powerful cult leader exploited human vulnerabilities, fostered extreme psychological dependence, and led his followers down a path of no return, revealing the terrifying power of mind control and the fragility of individual autonomy. What turns a utopian dream into a waking nightmare? To understand the tragedy of Jonestown, we have to look past the horrific headlines and into the mind of its architect, Jim Jones, and the psychological web he wove around his followers. In the beginning, Jones wasn't a monster, he was a messiah. He preached a powerful message of racial equality and social justice, creating a vibrant, diverse community called the People's Temple. For many, especially in the turbulent 60s and 70s, it felt like a sanctuary, a true family. They weren't fools, they were idealists, drawn to a charismatic leader who promised a better world. But this promise came with a hidden price. The first step in Jones's method was a tactic psychologists called love bombing. New members were showered with affection, praise, and a sense of belonging they'd never experienced before. It was intoxicating. He made them feel seen, valued, and loved unconditionally. Once they were emotionally invested, the isolation began. He encouraged them to sever ties with outside family and friends, sell their homes, and turn over their life savings to the church. The temple became their entire world, their only source of support and validation. Their individual identities started to fade, replaced by a collective one. Once in the isolated jungle settlement of Jonestown, Guyana, the psychological manipulation escalated dramatically. Jones's control became absolute. He used public humiliation to enforce loyalty, forcing members to confess their deepest fears and perceived sins in front of the entire community. This stripped them of their dignity and created a climate of constant fear and suspicion. He manufactured an us versus them mentality, convincing his followers that the outside world, the CIA, the government, was plotting to destroy their paradise. This siege mentality bonded them even tighter to him, their self-proclaimed protector. The most terrifying tool was the White Knights. These were rehearsals for mass suicide. Jones would sound an alarm in the middle of the night, claiming they were under attack. He'd tell everyone to drink a liquid he said was poisoned. It was a loyalty test. After moments of terror, he would reveal it was just a drill, a test of their faith. By repeatedly simulating death, he desensitized them to the very idea. The line between reality and performance blurred completely. They were no longer individuals with free will. They were a group conditioned for obedience, trapped in a psychological prison far stronger than any physical fence. The final act on November 18, 1978, wasn't a sudden burst of madness. It was the tragic, logical conclusion of years of systematic psychological erosion. Jones had dismantled their sense of self, their critical thinking, and their will to live outside of his control. When he gave the final order, for many, there was no other choice left to make. The story of Jonestown is a chilling reminder of how vulnerable the human mind can be to charismatic manipulation and the power of social pressure. It teaches us the critical importance of questioning authority and protecting our own individual autonomy. Thank you for watching. If you found this analysis insightful, please like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into complex human stories. Stay curious and stay safe. November 18, 1978. The arrival of Congressman Leo Ryan and his delegation, including concerned relatives and journalists, shattered the fragile illusion of Jonestown's paradise and triggered the final, catastrophic psychological breakdown. Ryan's visit was a direct threat to Jones's absolute control and the group's carefully constructed reality. His presence introduced external scrutiny and, crucially, offered a pathway out for disillusioned members. This external challenge intensified Jones's paranoia and the group's siege mentality. For Jones, the stakes were impossibly high. The defection of members and the exposure of his abuses would mean the collapse of his empire and likely criminal prosecution. His escalation of commitment to his cult and his vision meant he would go to any extreme to prevent its unraveling. He saw Ryan's visit not as an inquiry, but as an attack. As Ryan's delegation prepared to leave with a group of defectors, they were ambushed by temple guards. Congressman Ryan, 3 journalists, and 1 defector were murdered. This act of violence was a critical turning point, eliminating any hope of a peaceful resolution and pushing Jones into a corner. Psychologically, it solidified the us versus them narrative and convinced many followers that there was no turning back. They had crossed a line. Back in Jonestown, Jones gathered his followers. The White Knight drills, which had desensitized them to the idea of mass suicide, now became terrifyingly real. Jones, increasingly agitated and paranoid, declared that the outside world would destroy them, torture their children, and desecrate their utopia. He presented illusionary suicide as the only honorable escape, a final act of defiance against their perceived enemies. In this moment of extreme crisis, the years of psychological conditioning, isolation, and fear culminated in a horrifying display of obedience to authority and overwhelming group pressure. Jones's absolute authority, cultivated over decades, was unquestioned. His commands, no matter how horrific, were followed. The group's cohesion, the illusion of unanimity, and the fear of dissent meant that few openly resisted. Those who did were often coerced or forced. For many, the act of drinking the poisoned flavor aid was the ultimate resolution of their cognitive dissonance. By choosing death, they affirmed their loyalty to Jones and the temple, justifying all their sacrifices and beliefs in one final, tragic act. The alternative, facing the unknown, the evil outside world, or the wrath of Jones, was psychologically unbearable. For others, particularly the parents, the decision was driven by sheer desperation and hopelessness, believing there was no escape, and that their children would suffer if left behind. They tragically administered the poison to their own children before taking it themselves. The Jonestown massacre was not a spontaneous act of madness. It was the meticulously engineered, psychologically inevitable outcome of a cult leader's absolute control over a vulnerable group, culminating in a horrifying display of human obedience, conformity, and the tragic power of a collective delusion. Deep in the jungles of Guyana, a settlement called Jonestown was carved out of the wilderness. It was promised as a utopia, a sanctuary from the perceived evils of the outside world. But this isolation was the first step in a calculated process of control. Cut off from family, friends, and any news that wasn't filtered by their leader, the residents of Jonestown became a world unto themselves. Their reality was deliberately and methodically shrunk until it fit within the confines of the settlement's borders. The psychological grip tightened daily. Imagine every letter you write, every word you speak on a rare phone call, being scrutinized. Your connection to your past, to anyone who might question the new reality, was severed. Instead, the airwaves were filled with one voice, Jim Jones. His sermons, broadcast continuously over the settlement's loudspeakers, were a constant presence. They weren't just background noise. They were the new inner monologue for over 900 people, replacing individual thoughts with a shared, dictated consciousness. His voice was the first thing they heard in the morning and the last thing they heard at night. This shared consciousness fueled a powerful group dynamic. Communal labor, presented as a noble collective effort, further eroded personal identity. Individuality was seen as selfish. The most public displays of this were the confession meetings. Under the watchful eyes of the community and Jones's enforcers, people were pressured to admit to crimes against the group, often for minor infractions or even just for having doubtful thoughts. This public shaming created a culture of fear and conformity. Everyone became a potential accuser, and everyone was a potential suspect. A phenomenon known as groupthink took hold. The desire for harmony and conformity within the group resulted in an irrational or dysfunctional decision-making outcome. Dissent was not just discouraged, it was unthinkable. Then came the White Nights. Under the dim light of the central pavilion, Jones would declare a state of emergency, claiming enemies were closing in to destroy their paradise. He would present a vat of liquid, telling his followers it was poison and that the only dignified way out was a revolutionary suicide. These were drills, terrifying loyalty tests designed to break down the last vestiges of self-preservation. Imagine the fear, the confusion, the pressure to conform as you watch your neighbors, your friends, drink from the cups. Each rehearsal made the unthinkable seem more plausible, more inevitable. It was a conditioning process, normalizing the ultimate act of surrender. On November 18, 1978, the drill became real. The final White Night wasn't a sudden, inexplicable madness. It was the tragic, logical conclusion of a journey that began with the promise of a perfect community. It was the culmination of isolation, psychological manipulation, and the crushing power of the group over the individual. The empty pavilion, silent in the aftermath, stands as a haunting testament to how a desire for belonging, when twisted and exploited, can lead to the complete loss of self and the ultimate tragedy. It is a chilling reminder of the importance of critical thinking and the courage to maintain one's own voice, even when you feel alone. Thank you for watching. November 18, 1978, a day etched in history for one of the most chilling events of the 20th century, the Jonestown Massacre. Over 900 people, including children, lost their lives in a remote settlement in Guyana. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was a terrifying display of psychological manipulation and cult control. The story of Jonestown serves as a stark warning about the dangers of charismatic leaders who operate without accountability. Through isolation and controlling every piece of information, people were cut off from the outside world and their own judgment. This environment fostered intense groupthink and a frightening obedience to authority. To survive mentally, many had to ignore the growing contradictions, a painful state known as cognitive dissonance. The ultimate lesson from Jonestown is the critical importance of questioning everything and protecting our own minds. We must remain vigilant against manipulation in all its forms and never be afraid to challenge authority. Thanks for watching.